Blame is one of the easiest responses in life. When something goes wrong, the instinct is to look outward, to point the finger, to explain away failure by attaching it to someone else's actions or circumstances beyond our control. It feels comfortable in the moment because blame relieves us of immediate pressure. It says, it wasn't me, it was them. But comfort is often the enemy of growth, and the truth is that blame doesn't solve problems, multiplies them. When you blame, you give up your power. You transfer ownership of your life to something external. And in that moment, you lose the ability to change the outcome. Responsibility, on the other hand, is where all your strength resides. It may be uncomfortable, it may be demanding, but it is the only path that gives you the keys to steer your own destiny. Think about it. If every result you experience is someone else's fault, then what hope do you have of changing it? If it's the government's fault, do you really expect them to rearrange their agenda to suit your needs? If it's your boss's fault, do you expect him or her to carry the weight of your career? If it's your family's fault, do you expect them to design your future? Blame says the outcome belongs to someone else, but responsibility says the outcome belongs to you. That shift is what separates those who keep repeating the same cycles from those who break free and rise above. The moment you decide that your life is in your hands, everything begins to change. Blame also has a hidden cost. It eats away at your confidence. The more you blame, the more you convince yourself that you are powerless, that your life is at the mercy of events and people you cannot control. Slowly, you stop trying, you stop reaching, you settle into a mindset of waiting for conditions to improve rather than working to improve yourself. Responsibility does the opposite. It builds confidence because every time you accept ownership, you teach yourself that you are capable, that you can respond, that you have choices. Even if you fail, you know you had the courage to take the wheel, and that courage grows stronger each time you use it. Blame is also contagious. Surround yourself with people who constantly blame, and soon you will speak their language. Conversations will revolve around who is guilty, who should have done better, who didn't play fair, but nothing will move forward because blame never builds, it only destroys. Responsibility, however, is equally contagious. Get around people who accept it fully, and you will feel a different energy. Instead of wasting time on fault finding, they ask questions like, what's next? How can I do better? What's the next step? Their progress becomes proof that responsibility always pays dividends. When you see them grow, succeed, and push forward despite obstacles, it reminds you that you have the same power available. If you are willing to stop pointing fingers and start pointing inward, the real test of responsibility comes when circumstances truly are unfair. It is one thing to accept ownership when you made the mistake, but quite another when life hands you a setback that was no fault of your own. In those moments, blame is the natural reaction, but it still leaves you powerless. Responsibility doesn't mean you caused it. Responsibility means you will take control of what happens next. You didn't choose the storm, but you can choose whether to rebuild. You didn't choose the failure, but you can choose whether to learn. You didn't choose the disappointment, but you can choose whether to rise again. That is the strength that responsibility brings. No matter what happens, you are never stuck, never trapped, never without options. As long as you hold yourself accountable for the next move, you can spend a lifetime waiting for things outside of your control to align, but they rarely will. The economy shifts, governments change policies, people disappoint, the weather turns unfavorable, and circumstances never remain steady. If your success depends on those forces, you'll always be at their mercy. Tossed around like a leaf in the wind. The truth is, the external world will never perfectly cooperate with your desires. But the great discovery is that you don't need it to. The one thing you can always influence is yourself, your thoughts, your habits, your actions, your responses. And that's where the real leverage lies. The world doesn't have to get easier if you can get stronger. The market doesn't have to be perfect if your skills are sharp. People don't have to always agree with you if your discipline and persistence are unshakable. You know, most people live in the trap of conditions. They say, I'll be happy when the weather is better. I'll work harder when the boss treats me. Right? I'll be motivated when the economy recovers. But conditions are a moving target. Wait for them, and you'll wait forever. Winners don't rely on the weather. They learn to work through the rain. They don't rely on the economy. They find ways to create value regardless of cycles. They don't rely on people behaving perfectly. They adapt, adjust, and continue building regardless of others' choices. This is why personal growth is the greatest investment you can make. The stronger you are, the less fragile your life becomes. The world can shift around you, and you still move forward because your foundation is not built on shifting ground. It's built within, think of two farmers. One spends his days complaining that the seasons are unpredictable, that rain doesn't come when it should. Let's destroy his crops. He shakes his fist at the sky, but his fields remain empty. The other farmer understands he cannot command the weather, so he invests his time learning irrigation techniques, building stronger soil, and planting crops suited for resilience. He doesn't waste his breath blaming. He spends his energy preparing. Who do you think gathers the harvest? The second, because he realized early that life isn't about waiting for perfect conditions, but about improving himself to meet any condition. That same principle applies in every area of life. Success is not about control over circumstances. It's about control over your preparation and your response. The moment you accept that outside forces will never bend perfectly to your will, you free yourself from frustration. You stop saying, why won't things change? And start asking, how can I change? That shift creates progress because it puts the focus back where it belongs, on the part of the equation you can influence. Every time you grow, life expands. Every new skill you learn, every attitude you refine, every discipline you master increases your capacity to deal with whatever the world throws your way. You may not control the storm, but you can control your sail. You may not control the economy, but you can control your creativity. You may not control others, but you can control your standards, your work ethic, and your character. It's a liberating truth, though at first it feels like a burden. People often resist it because it takes away excuses. If you can change yourself, then the responsibility is yours. That's a heavy realization, but it's also the most empowering one, because once you see it, you understand you are not a victim of your environment. You are the designer of your response. No matter how uncertain the outside world becomes, you can be certain about one thing. Your ability to keep improving yourself will always carry you further than blaming the conditions around you. Taking full responsibility is not a part-time commitment. It's an all-or-nothing decision. Many people try to negotiate with it, to take responsibility only when it's convenient or when it makes them look good. They say, I'll own up to this piece, but not that one. I'll do my part if they do theirs. I'll give 50%, and the rest is someone else's burden. But responsibility doesn't work that way. Half responsibility is no responsibility at all. When you put conditions on it, you dilute its power. The standard is not partial ownership. The standard is complete ownership, 100%. Because only when you take full control of what is within it, your reach, do you gain the strength to create real change. Think of a captain on a ship. If he takes responsibility only when the sea is calm, he's not really a captain. If he says, I'll steer only when the waves are gentle. But if a storm comes, it's the wind's fault. That ship will never survive the voyage. Leadership demands total responsibility, not conditional responsibility. Life works the same way. If you want to lead your own life, you must be willing to own it in every circumstance. Whether the sea is calm or raging, 100% responsibility means you refuse to hide behind excuses, you refuse to pass the burden, and you refuse to wait for someone else to solve your problems. It means you decide in advance that everything in your life is ultimately connected to your choices, your mindset, and your discipline. Now, many resist this idea because it feels overwhelming. They say, how can I be responsible for everything when so much is out of my control? But that's where the clarity lies. 100% responsibility doesn't mean you caused everything. It means you choose your response to everything. You didn't cause a setback, but you are responsible for how you move forward from it. You didn't cause the betrayal, but you are responsible for whether you let bitterness or resilience shape you. You didn't cause the downturn in the market, but you are responsible for how you adapt, how you prepare, and how you use your skills to find opportunity in difficulty. Full responsibility is about refusing to let anything outside of you determine the quality of your future. Excuses are easy to make, and they sound reasonable in the moment. It's because of them. It's because of this situation. It's because the timing wasn't right. But every excuse chips away at your ability to act. The more you explain away your results, the less power you have to change them. Excuses create a pattern of surrender, a habit of deflecting ownership. Full responsibility breaks that habit. It forces you to stop asking, who's at fault, and start asking, what can I do next? That one shift takes you from victim to creator, from waiting to moving, from drifting to directing. The truth is, people who live by partial responsibility always stay dependent. They are forever waiting for conditions, waiting for cooperation, waiting for someone else to carry the missing half. But people who live by full responsibility don't wait. They act. They understand that even if others don't do their part, they can still move forward. They understand that even if circumstances aren't ideal, they can still create progress. They understand that life may not always give them fairness, but they can always give their best. 100% responsibility is not just about accountability, it's about freedom. When you accept all of it, nothing can hold you hostage. Because no matter what happens, the solution begins with you. Excuses sound convincing because they carry just enough truth to disguise the damage they cause. When you say, I couldn't do it because the weather was bad, it feels valid. When you explain, I didn't have the right support, it feels logical. But underneath every excuse lies the same pattern. It chains you down and keeps you exactly where you are. Excuses are comfort statements. They soothe the sting of failure, but they rob you of the power to grow. Responsibility, on the other hand, is liberating. It doesn't soften the truth, but it gives you the authority to change it. When you take responsibility, you take off the chains. You refuse to stay stuck. You create freedom, because freedom belongs to those who own their choices, not those who explain them away. The danger of excuses is how easily they multiply. One excuse quickly becomes two, and soon a person builds an entire wall of justifications around their life. Behind that wall, they protect themselves from discomfort, but they also block themselves from opportunity. Excuses become a shield against effort. They make it possible to feel safe while standing still. But safe doesn't lead to progress. Safe doesn't produce growth. Responsibility tears down that wall. It forces you to step into the open, where effort is required, where discomfort is certain, but where reward rewards are also waiting. Responsibility may feel harder at first, but it's the only way forward, you know? Excuses also affect how others see you. People respect those who accept responsibility. They trust them, they look to them, they are willing to invest in them, but excuses drive respect away. When you constantly shift the blame or point to external reasons for why something wasn't done, people see inconsistency, unreliability, and weakness. They may nod politely when you explain yourself, but they quietly decide you cannot be depended upon. Responsibility builds credibility. Each time you say, yes, it was me, and here's what I will do to fix it, you strengthen your reputation. Each time you own your actions without hiding behind circumstances, you earn trust. Over time, that trust opens doors that excuses will always keep closed. Excuses also rob you of learning. When you explain away failure, you shut the door on reflection. Instead of asking, what could I have done differently? You conclude, there was nothing I could do. That belief ends the lesson before it begins. Keeps the lesson alive. When you own a failure, you are forced to face it, study it, and extract wisdom from it. That process may sting, but it transforms mistakes into teachers. Every responsible step builds knowledge, and every piece of knowledge builds strength. Excuses repeat failure, responsibility redeems it. The contrast between excuses and responsibility is like the difference between a cage and a key. Excuses keep you locked in, circling the same problems, telling the same stories, and living the same results. Responsibility unlocks the door. It may not change the conditions instantly, but it changes your position. It allows you to step forward, to act differently, to try again with new determination. It creates space where growth can happen. Excuses whisper, stay here, it's safer, but responsibility declares, move, there is more. The one who chooses responsibility chooses the path of freedom, and the one who chooses excuses remains a prisoner of their own words. When you blame others for your failures, you hand them your power. It may not feel that way in the moment because blame creates the illusion of control. You think you're explaining the situation, but what you're really doing is surrendering authority over your results. The moment you say it's their fault, you are telling yourself, I cannot change this unless they change first. That is the most dangerous position you can put yourself in because it ties your future to someone else's decisions. It says your progress depends on their behavior. Your success depends on their approval. Your destiny depends on their choices. That is not power. That is dependency. And dependency is a slow poison to personal growth. Think of a person who blames their employer for every disappointment. My boss doesn't pay me enough. My boss doesn't see my potential. My boss keeps holding me back. If those words are true, then what options do they leave themselves? If everything depends on the boss, then the only way forward is for the boss to suddenly transform into a generous leader who never makes mistakes. But waiting for that to happen is foolish. A person who blames has no leverage to change the situation. A person who takes responsibility is the one who says, I'm going to build new skills. I'm going to increase my value. I'm going to outgrow this limitation. Takes the power back into their hands. Blame hands control away. Responsibility retrieves it. The same is true in relationships. When one partner says, I would be happier if they treated me differently, they surrender their happiness to the moods and actions of someone else. It is a powerless position. Responsibility says, I will decide how I communicate, how I set boundaries, how I respond, and how I contribute. It shifts the focus inward, where the only real power lies. Waiting for someone else to change before you change is like waiting for the wind to blow before you adjust the sail. The sailor who blames the wind will drift endlessly. But the sailor who takes responsibility for the sail can reach any destination. You know, blaming others also steals your victories. If you give them the responsibility for your failures, you must also give them the responsibility for your successes. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot say I failed because of them, but I succeeded because of me. It doesn't work like that. If you surrender the losses, you also surrender the wins. And what joy is there in a victory you didn't truly own? Responsibility makes success sweeter because you know it was your effort, your choices, your discipline that created the outcome. Blame removes that satisfaction by making you a spectator in your own story instead of the author of it, you know? Another problem with blame is that it breeds resentment. The more you point fingers, the more bitterness you build. You begin to feel that life owes you something, that people owe you something, that circumstances are conspiring against you. That bitterness blinds you. Even when solutions are in front of you, you cannot see them because your energy is locked up in resentment. Responsibility clears the fog. It doesn't deny the challenge, but it shifts your focus from resentment to action. Action. It asks, what can I do right now with what I have? That simple question reopens doors that blame has slammed shut. Blame may feel like a release in the short term, but it is a trap in the long term. It turns you into a dependent spectator, always waiting for others to fix what you could be working on yourself. Responsibility is the opposite. It may feel heavy in the short term because it forces you to face your part in the result, but it creates long-term strength and independence. When you take ownership, you free yourself from the need to wait, from the need to hope others will act, from the dependence on out. You place your future where it belongs, in your own hands. Responsibility is often seen as a burden, but in reality, regret is the heavier weight. Responsibility might demand effort, discipline, and humility. But regret demands your peace of mind. It lingers. It whispers in the back of your thoughts, reminding you of what you could have done, should have done, but didn't. Responsibility requires you to face challenges today. Regret makes you relive missed opportunities for the rest of your life. Many people avoid responsibility because it feels hard in the moment, but the difficulty of responsibility is temporary. The pain of regret is permanent. Choosing responsibility means carrying a load you can control, while choosing excuses means carrying a weight that never leaves. Think about the student who chooses not to study because the material is difficult. At first, skipping the work feels like relief. They tell themselves they'll get by, they'll figure it out later. But when exam day arrives and failure stares them in the face, the regret sets in. The time they wasted, the effort they didn't make, the responsibility they avoided now turns into a weight that follows them into the future. The same principle applies to health, to finances, to relationships. Avoiding responsibility in the short term might save you discomfort, but it multiplies discomfort in the long term. Responsibility asks you to pay the price now. Regret makes you pay it forever. Responsibility sharpens you. Every time you choose it, you grow stronger. You develop habits of discipline, self-respect, and action. It shapes your character into someone who can handle more, achieve more, and give more. Regret, by contrast, weakens you. It drains energy because you spend your thoughts replaying the past instead of preparing for the future. It steals confidence because every time you avoid responsibility, you remind yourself that you ran away from your own potential. It steals joy because it clouds your ability to celebrate today. You're too busy thinking about what might have been. Responsibility may stretch you in the moment, but it always adds to your strength. Regret, always subtracts. And the difference between responsibility and regret is most obvious in later years. Ask someone who built their life on excuses, and you'll hear stories of chances they missed, dreams they abandoned, and goals they never pursued. Their language is filled with if only and what if. Ask someone who embraced responsibility, and you'll hear stories of lessons learned, battles fought, and victories earned. Their life is not perfect, but it is full. They may have scars, but they have no haunting sense of, I never tried. They carry the lighter load of effort, not the crushing weight of regret. That contrast begins with the choices you make today, whether to carry the weight of discipline or the weight of excuses. You know, it's important to realize that responsibility and regret are both heavy, but only one leads to freedom. Carrying responsibility builds resilience. Each challenge faced makes the next one easier. You realize you can handle more than you thought, and that realization gives you confidence. Carrying regret builds hesitation. Each missed chance makes the next one harder to take. You begin to doubt yourself, and that doubt keeps you frozen. One path strengthens, the other weakens. One frees you to move, the other chains you in place. The load of responsibility may feel heavy on your shoulders for a season, but the load of regret presses down on your spirit for a lifetime. You know, what makes responsibility powerful is that it can be chosen at any moment. No matter where you are, no matter what mistakes you've made, you can decide to pick up responsibility now. That choice immediately begins to lighten the weight of regret, because responsibility creates new chances, new opportunities, new paths forward. Every time you act responsibly, you build a future that you won't have to look back on with disappointment. Every responsible choice removes one more brick from the wall of regret and replaces it with a stepping stone toward progress. Responsibility may feel demanding, but it is the only weight worth carrying because it leads you somewhere you want to go. When faced with setbacks, most people immediately ask, who's to blame? It's a reflex, a way to shift the focus outward and remove the sting of accountability. But the better question, the question that moves you forward is what can I do? That question transforms a dead end into a path. Blame looks backward, responsibility looks forward. Blame ties your future to someone else's actions. Responsibility places your future back in your own hands. Every time you ask, what can I do? You remind yourself that you still have choices, you still have options, you still have control over the next step. You know, asking what you can do changes your mindset. Instead of fixating on what went wrong, you begin to focus on what can be made right. Instead of waiting for others to fix the situation, you look for ways to use your own resources, creativity, and determination to create progress. It's a shift from victimhood to ownership. It's not about ignoring the fact that others may have contributed to the problem. It's about refusing to give them the final say over your outcome. Even if someone else caused the challenge, you control how you respond to it. Asking, what can I do, puts you back in the driver's seat. Consider someone who loses their job unexpectedly. The first instinct might be to say, it's unfair. My boss ruined my career. The company treated me badly. That blame may feel justified, but it doesn't create a new job. The person who instead asks, what can I do? Immediately starts looking at their skills, updating their resume, reaching out to contacts, and exploring new opportunities. The problem is the same, but the outcome is drastically different. One person stays stuck because they're focused on who caused the loss, while the other moves forward because they're focused on what they can do next. This principle applies to small things as well as large. If traffic makes you late, you could sit and curse the roads, or you could ask, what can I do? Maybe you leave earlier next time. Maybe you use the time in the car to listen to something that sharpens your mind. If a deal falls through, you could blame the client for not following through, or you could ask, what can I do? Maybe you refine your pitch, improve your preparation, or pursue the next opportunity with greater persistence. Life is full of disappointments and inconveniences, but each one can either become an excuse to stop or a prompt to ask what you can do differently. You know, the beauty of asking this question is that it always produces action. Blame produces arguments, explanations, and stories. Responsibility produces steps, no matter how small. The step may not solve the entire problem immediately, but it creates momentum. Momentum is powerful because it builds confidence. When you take even a small action, you remind yourself that you are not powerless. That feeling carries into the next step and the next until progress is visible. Blame halts momentum, responsibility creates it. The simple question, what can I do, is the spark that keeps the fire alive. Another reason this mindset works is because it focuses your energy. Energy is limited. If you spend it replaying who is at fault, you drain yourself without moving forward. But if you spend it on identifying actions you can take, you invest it into something productive. Over time, this habit of redirecting energy compounds, you become known as the person who acts, not the person who complains. People respect those who take initiative. They admire those who look for solutions. Yeah. Instead of pointing fingers, asking, what can I do? Not only benefits you, it influences how others see you. See you, and opportunities often flow toward those who take responsibility rather than those who avoid it. What makes this question powerful is that it never depends on circumstances. You may not be able to control what just happened, but you can always decide how to respond. You may not be able to change someone else's decision, but you can always choose your next move. Every situation, no matter how difficult, contains at least one action you can take. It may be a small step, but that step is yours. The habit of asking, what can I do, ensures that you never stay stuck in the past and never remain powerless in the present. It creates a forward focus that no amount of blame could ever give you. Life has a way of rewarding those who step up and take full ownership of their choices. The rewards may not come instantly, but they are certain. For those who consistently practice responsibility, when you take ownership, you build trust with yourself and with others. You prove through action that you can be relied upon, that you are not looking for excuses, that you will follow through no matter what. This reliability is magnetic. Opportunities flow toward people who can be trusted to handle them. The best rewards of life do not go to those who complain, criticize, or shift blame. They go to those who quietly accept the challenge, do the work, and carry the weight of their decisions without running away from it. No. When you take ownership, you gain a sense of control that blame will never give you. Blame leaves you waiting for someone else to change. Responsibility puts the power in your own hands to create change. Shift creates confidence. Every time you honor your word, every time you take action, instead of offering an excuse, you reinforce the belief that you are capable. That belief becomes the foundation of greater achievements. Success is not built on luck or perfect conditions. It is built on the quiet strength of personal responsibility, repeated over and over, until it produces visible results. Each responsible choice becomes like a brick in the structure of your future, and before long, you have built something strong enough to withstand storms. Taking ownership also improves relationships. People want to be around those who can admit mistakes, who can own their part, who don't constantly deflect or point fingers. It creates respect. Respect opens doors that talent alone cannot open. Many talented individuals stay stuck because they are unwilling to accept responsibility, while those with slightly less talent but greater responsibility earn trust, and rise higher. Responsibility has a multiplying effect. It takes what you already have and magnifies it. Skills matter, knowledge matters, but without responsibility to guide them, they never reach their full potential. When responsibility is added to the mix, even average skills can produce extraordinary results. Right? Ownership also brings peace of mind. Excuses may feel comforting for a moment, but they leave a lingering sense of weakness. Deep down, you know when you've blamed instead of owned. That knowledge creates tension side, a quiet dissatisfaction that never goes away. Responsibility brings the opposite. Even when you fail, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I did what I could. I gave my best. I accepted my part. That creates a calm strength that excuses can never provide. Peace of mind doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integrity. And integrity is built through responsibility. Another reward of ownership is growth. Every responsible choice, every time you decide to accept the outcome and learn from it, you gain wisdom. Excuses stop the learning process. They shut the door on growth because they convinced you there was nothing to learn, nothing to improve. Responsibility keeps the door open. It forces you to reflect, to adjust, to get better. That steady growth compounds into success over time. The person who takes ownership today may not see dramatic results tomorrow, but over years, the difference is undeniable. Their character strengthens, their opportunities increase, their influence expands, and their life takes on a richness that blame can never produce. Taking responsibility also aligns with how life itself operates. The world rewards cause and effect. If you sow discipline, you reap progress. If you sow excuses, you reap regret. Responsibility aligns you with that law. It ensures that the seeds you are planting are worth harvesting. People who avoid responsibility may get by for a season, but eventually the harvest comes and the field is empty. People who embrace ownership may struggle at first, but eventually their harvest is abundant. The rewards are not reserved for the lucky. They are reserved for the responsible.